Hello and welcome to Dear Dr. Cherise, a mental health podcast where we view life through the lens of neuroscience, integrative health, and mindset so you can learn, grow, and honor the space you're designed to occupy. Welcome to this episode. If the title of this episode drew your attention, then chances are you're someone who has said to yourself before, if I knew then what I know now, or perhaps you would be what we would consider a level of a high achiever. And you recognize that over time, with the dynamics of all the achievement that you have aspired to or executed, you've neglected yourself along the way. And this can be across the board. Maybe you're an executive who's traded your well being for deadlines and launching projects. Maybe you're a parent who's sidelined health for caregiving or taking care of those you love. Maybe you're an athlete who has pushed through pain to the point where it's come at a cost and everything in between. But here's what's so important to know: neglecting yourself isn't just about missing a workout or sleep. It's the cumulative message that you send your brain that your needs are negotiable. And today is the day that I would love to help you exchange that narrative and expire that mindset and begin again to make your needs center. So, many high achievers feel they should have known better, or done better, or acted sooner. But neuroscience tells us that guilt and regret have very complex roots and surprising benefits when those emotions are used correctly. Let's take a look at the neuroscience of guilt, shame, and regret. So, guilt is intended to be a motivator if it's adaptive, not maladaptive, right? The difference is adaptive, it's going to be used for your benefit. Maladaptive means you get stuck in that guilt. When we look at the neuroscience of guilt, the anterior cingulate cortex and the insula are two parts of the brain that light up when we feel guilt. These areas are tied to empathy or error detection and social learning, so they have value. Guilt is part of what helps us learn empathy and to recognize, oh, I feel bad for how something I've done or haven't done is impacting or showing up in the life of someone else, including ourselves. Guilt is functional when it leads to repair behavior. But chronic guilt, especially over things that you can't change, turns into emotional quicksand, right? Repair behavior, that's when guilt is playing an appropriate adaptive role. Emotional quicksand, where you feel stuck and lost and like you can't get out, when it becomes maladaptive. Then we have shame. Shame is like the self attack mode. When you're in this mindset, it activates your default mode network, DMN, which is responsible for self reflection, but also responsible for overthinking, self criticism, and internalized worthlessness. Chronic shame decreases the activity in your prefrontal cortex. So that's going to impair your executive functioning and your decision making, which is crucial for all of us, but specifically crucial for those of you that consider yourselves high performers. So, shame and the root of shame and a mindset that is steeped in shame as an achiever or as someone who just wants to get things done well in life will keep you from making the decisions that are rooted in your highest self and create this very quiet yet loud sense of worthlessness. That's something that we don't often consider, is that you can look the part and you can be achieving amazing things, but the internal narrative and mindset can be that of, I am not worthy because I'm ashamed of how I'm showing up and all the things that I'm not doing. Shame also increases cortisol and suppresses oxytocin, that love hormone, which means it reduces your connection and then increases your physiological stress. Think about that. When you are filled with shame, it will make it more difficult for you to receive love and to believe that you can be loved. This is why we cannot depend on our achievements or on other people or on colleagues or our children or our spouse or all of the things that are external to us to do an internal work. And then there's regret, a double edged sword. Regret primarily activates the orbital frontal cortex, which helps us stimulate better outcomes and avoid future mistakes. So, regret has purpose when it's used appropriately. But rumination on regret, that's where you get caught. That is where you are going through a loop of regret around uncontrollable and unchangeable outcomes. And that's linked to depressive thinking patterns or even impaired immune function due to persistent stress signaling. So, what I want you to gather out of all of what I've just said is that a mindset that is rooted in self neglect, with the undercore, the roots of that being guilt, right, regret, and shame, are going to impact you neurobiologically. It's going to link you to higher cortisol and stress. It's going to link you to dynamics such as an impaired immune system, potentially depression, or even anxiety. Guilt, shame, and regret are adaptive by design, but only when we move through them, not live in them. Where are you? Are you moving through these things? Or are you living in them and trying to show up in the world and pretend that everything is okay? Here's some good news around this topic. Understanding everything about why you can't get it right or can't do it the way you need to or made that past decision, understanding everything isn't required to heal. The prefrontal cortex, yes, it loves closure, but the brain doesn't need full understanding to rewire. It needs repetition, safety, and embodied action. Repetition. It needs to know that it can trust you and trust your behaviors. It needs safety. It needs to feel somatically safe, which means you will need to be in environments and connected to people that when you're with them, that you don't feel like you have to be on alert. And it needs embodied action where you're not disconnected, you're not dissociated, you are present and intentional. Over analysis activates the DMN. I said that a few minutes ago, so that's going to keep you in a cycle of why versus what now. What now is where I want you to go. When I'm working with clients or I'm speaking out somewhere through organizations and various communities, that's always the exchange. You want to expire. Why? And move to what now? In light of what I do understand and the clarity I do have, what can I do now? And remember, emotional healing is somatic, not just cognitive. We like to kind of separate things from the neck up and from the neck down, but the two are wired together. Neuroplasticity, that ability that we have to change and to grow and to rewire the way we think and act and believe, is rooted and demands new behaviors and safe emotional experiences more than perfect logic. So if you've been a person in the past that perfect logic has always been what you've aspired to, I want you to walk slowly away from that and know that what you actually need are safe emotional experiences on repeat in ways that allow you to feel like, okay, I can be myself. I can show up here and I don't need to be ashamed. I don't need to be filled with regret. And I do not need to live in guilt. So the goal isn't to decode your history like a puzzle. The goal is to give your nervous system new stories through what you do now. I want you to think about that. As we move into the next part of this series on this topic, when we return, I will give you some practical strategies for how to move forward that you don't want to miss. But until then, listen intently, maybe replay what we've talked about today, see what resonates and what you need to reflect on. Take a moment and decide for yourself, am I rooted in guilt? Am I rooted in shame? Am I rooted in regret? What am I finding to be the benefit, or what am I finding to be the cost? Because it's not just about, remember, this perfect logic that you're trying to create. It is all about having reflection with direction. Remember, guilt will say, I did something wrong. Shame will say, there's something wrong with me. Regret says, if only I had known better. But what I want you to remind yourself is that you can have reflection with direction, and without direction, it becomes rumination. As you go throughout the rest of your week, I also encourage you to stay connected with me in other spaces. I'm on Cadre on Wednesdays at 7 a.m. and Sundays at 6:30 p.m. You can find me on most social media, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and most importantly, make sure that you apply what you're hearing, because knowledge is not power without application. I'll talk to you soon.